Well, good evening. It's Monday night, and we're getting ready to drop our next episode on February 24th, 2026 with Roman Pedan. You know, one of the best parts about the hospitality industry, and quite frankly, this podcast, is getting to connect with new people. And my good friend, Jonathan Vopinik, who you might remember as my first guest on the podcast, actually introduced me to today's guest, Roman. Roman brings a wealth of experience with him from working at KKR and Wall Street Capital to then scaling Kasa the last 10 years and raising $186 million along the way, no small feat. We dig into the Sonder fallout, growing up in an immigrant household, and how Kasa is delivering to its owners and its guests. Now, I've had many a public CEO already on the podcast, but I really see Roman as a cut of the new generation of leaders in hospitality, one that brings dry wit, pragmatism, and an understanding that technology will disrupt even hotels. So I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed recording it. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Not Done. I'm Sloan Dean, and today I have Roman Pedan, the founder and CEO of Kasa, a tech-enabled hospitality company with over 85 boutique apartment-style hotels across the U.S. And if you're not familiar with Kasa, they've got about 150 million plus in annual bookings for markets from Chicago, Denver, Pittsburgh, San Diego. They just raised last year another 40 million through Silver Lake Waterman to accelerate their AI capabilities. And Roman started Kasa in 2016, but before that, he actually worked at KKR, where he was vital in helping them with some of their hotel transactions. Before that, Wall Street Capital, Juniper Square, and also got a BS in computer science and economics from Wharton, followed by an MBA from Stanford. So the pedigree speaks for itself, Roman. Obviously, you're a good test taker. Welcome to the show. I know you just completed in January, so just weeks ago, a strategic combination with Mint House. So congratulations on that. And I think that added 1,000 units to your portfolio. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, that's right. We completed that acquisition at the end of the year, announced it a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show because we've had a lot of traditional CEOs, if you will. But, I see what you're doing at Kasa, and maybe this is wrong, right? You can correct me. It's kind of the new way of business, kind of blending tech with operations. Now, I will say, if you look at some other companies that try to do that, Lifehouse, I don't think Sonder's maybe a great example, but you could throw them in. Some of them have gone out of business, right? And some are still in business, like Vacasa, I think, but I think they're struggling. How are you guys different?
We want to learn the lessons that are ancient and then combine it with what's different in the modern world. One of the things that's different is we're working very hard not to ignore the tried and true learnings that have been hard won by amazing hoteliers on the shoulders which we sit. So no matter what technology you have to deliver a high quality and hospitality infused experience to guests. You want to work extremely hard to lower costs of your operation while not degrading service. You want to have a real intentionality in how you bring spaces to life. And you need to have the basics down of segmentation, revenue management, and operations. And so I think where we are different is we blend the old world and maybe, ancient defined as the last a few hundred-year lessons with the new school and new world capabilities of automation, technology, centralization that allows us to deliver unique margin to owners and a uniquely compelling experience to guests. I'd say the other thing we really have prided ourselves on, and for context, this sector, to your point, has had mixed results for others who've entered into it. And part of that is the last 6 years have been unforgiving to new entrants into hospitality. It's hard to build a new business, but when COVID, vast interest rate changes, massive fluctuations in demand patterns, right? One day urban is king, another day rural is king. It tends to create a lot of distress in a sector. And so many of those companies, worked really hard and tirelessly, and it just was a difficult environment. But some of the things that we did differently include really focusing on the foundation first. So when you build a piece of real estate, you have to build the foundation before you create the frills, And so we really focused on building our operating system from the ground up. We built our own PMS. We built our own systems that really ground us in operating efficiently and effectively. And only over time do we layer in more design, do we layer in some of the things that are important, but need to sit upon a sound footing.
I didn't realize you guys built your own PMS. Do you guys license that at all, or you only use it for your hotels?
To start, we have used it just for powering our infrastructure. But over time, we're excited to partner with other hotel managers, owners, and creatives. People who have a clear vision for a brand that they want to build in hospitality, but don't want to get mired in all the back end that they need to get right that isn't actually crucial to expressing their creativity. If you have a compelling and exciting brand vision, you still have to figure out the technology stack, make 100 decisions you're not a specialist in on how to bring different systems together, build out an accounting and finance organization, build out a reservations and customer service organization. We've done that. We've meticulously worked through the million different things that underlie the system that we built. And we're excited to partner with creatives to use our infrastructure and bring their brand to life. We call that powered by Kasa. We do that in a very quiet way because it's quite a bespoke offering, but we have been offering it to select folks where they want to bring brands to life or they want to supercharge their operation, and it can sit on top of our PMS. And I believe we're the only hotel management company that has that kind of proprietary.
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, I think Rami tried to say he did, but he was kind of full of shit. It was really Muse, if we're just being honest. I'm sure there's a lot of R&D that went in that. We'll come back to that. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't start before getting into tech conversation. I want to have a long conversation around the Sonder bankruptcy because you and I both have strong opinions. But you, for a rewind the tape, you came over. Were you born overseas?
Yeah. So I was born in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
My family, when I was 2, a large number of refugees came over from the Soviet Union. So I was born in modern day Ukraine, but at the time it was part of the Soviet Union. And in 1989, my family came over. I was very young, and I feel immense responsibility and gratitude to my parents who, they didn't know the language, they didn't have a network here. And they really took a in my view, bigger entrepreneurial risk than I did to build a better life for me and my brother. And my dad, when he made that decision, was about my age. So that would be like if I moved to China today and tried to make a different life for myself, that would be a far greater challenge and bigger risk than what we're building.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's compelling is probably a gross understatement. One of the things that I've observed in having a lot of friends that are founders is that it's very common for actually immigrant families or immigrant children to be entrepreneurial. There's something about the DNA and that heritage of risk taking that lends itself to really good entrepreneurs. I mean, if you look at people like Dara, who is the CEO of now Uber, is a self-made guy. His family were refugees. I mean, you look at the Magnificent Seven, several of their CEOs are immigrants. If you look at over the success of the United States, we have been really phenomenal through our university system and some other programs of importing real talent. What is it about that? Is it just that you're born into, a little bit more hardship? What's your take on that?
I think there is something to it. If you ask what does it take to build a business, a lot of the elements that are required rhyme with what's required to decide to immigrate. I mean, the first thing is the decision to do something that is against the grain of what everyone else is doing. Almost by definition, most people stay in the country they were born. They don't think, well, maybe the life would be different if I moved somewhere else. You have to ask that question, and you have to be willing to bet on yourself. And you have to believe that there is something greater elsewhere. So that's sort of the starting line. There's a grit and determination that's required. My parents came with the proverbial $1,000 and a great education. And I think the great education was the priceless element of what they came with. And one of the things that they instilled was important in us. And education isn't going to Stanford. It's not pedigree. It's asking questions. It's tirelessly learning. It's not studying for the test. It's curiosity and passion. My dad was a PhD in physics in the Soviet Union. My mom was an MBA in communist Russia. An MBA from communism doesn't really apply effectively in the United States. And my dad and my mom both retrained to professions when they came over that matched opportunities in the United States. And so there's a need for adaptability as well. I don't define entrepreneurship as risk-taking necessarily. I actually think it's more risk reduction, trying to figure out, okay, you want to start something, but you're not looking to maximize risk. I hate Vegas in the gambling. I go to Vegas, but I never gamble because if the house has a huge advantage against me, That is against my constitution. I want to figure out how to increase our odds of success and reduce our risks constantly. And I think, immigrants they're not taking risks for risk taking itself.
Their definition of risk is very different. Me having been a W-2 up until the age of 44, my definition was different. My take is that most people don't take enough risk in life. It's our evolution from, having to look around our shoulder, are we going to get eaten by a tiger, to we are more risk averse. And in today's world, actually people don't bet on themselves often enough. And I think that's actually, if you look at the people that are very, very successful, I mean, Elon is the extreme example of like his risk tolerance is like through the roof. Not that I agree with everything that Elon does. The two things that actually come up to mind for me is there's a famous video of Tony Robinson where he says, if you really want to be successful and take the island, you burn your boats when you get to the island because you have no other alternative. And I think that's the mindset that, like, if you're self-made or come from a poor family or immigrant, you're not going to quit. Like, the other alternative is you die. If you grow up in a wealthy family and you're not successful, you're still wealthy. So that's one. And the other thing is that Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, I'm curious to get your take on this. Did you see the video where he was speaking to Stanford students and he says that the problem with them is their expectations, and that he said, if you want to really achieve greatness, you have to have gone through real suffering. And, he talks a lot about how he was waiting tables. He's from an immigrant family and he suffered a lot. And he says, you can't really achieve greatness without suffering. I don't know if you've seen that video, and he's talking to Stanford grads and almost kind of dissing them a little bit. You're a Stanford grad, so I don't mean to knock.
Yeah, look, there's definitely wisdom in some of these things. For one, I think you can redefine what risk is and what success looks like. In some ways, I actually think I was privileged by having seen my family. We define privilege in a way where if you're born with a lot of resources and a lot of money, you have access to so many things and that others don't. And in some ways, I actually would reverse it. And not to say, my family, I was really proud when we came to the United States. We didn't have very much. And then my parents progressively got better and better paying jobs. And I really saw this journey of the American dream. And though we were never extremely well off, we made it to the upper middle class from probably the lower middle class. And I found that to be an immense source of privilege because I could see what grit and hard work led to. I do think suffering, to your question, is very useful. There's like an amount that stretches you but doesn't break you. There's like different types of fun. Type 1 fun is you're having fun at a party and it's just joyful. But there's type 2 fun, which I personally find a lot of fulfillment with. And it's you run a marathon and it's painful, but it's purposeful. Or you build something and it's hard and you come up against time and time again challenges. And in those challenges, you find meaning. And in the excellence that you're driving towards, you find real satisfaction. And that to me is maybe what Jensen was talking about, because it's not just the satisfaction and the meaning that you're getting through those challenges, it's the growth. And so to your risk comment, sometimes you feel like the road that's less risky, the W-2, is the less risky road. But, there's an old story about when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, he realized the riskier thing than staying at his hedge fund job was looking back at 70 years old and regretting not giving it a shot. Now, obviously, his story ended in great success. But if you feel like doing something and giving it the best shot is the fulfillment and so the success itself, then perhaps it's riskier not trying, giving it your fullest effort. At the same time, we can't have an entire country of entrepreneurs. So we can't, this is advice.
Well, we might be headed that way. There's an argument. I'm trying to think who was talking, saying how all the value is going to be now in smaller companies. So let's talk about Sonder. And for those of that listening in, Sonder filed bankruptcy and solvency last year. And you wrote in the Commercial Observer that their collapse was the WeWork movie as a rerun in slow motion. Kasa has now taken over a good many of the former Sonder properties. Walk me through what you saw as an inside view from as you picked up operations. And then part 2 question, you talk about, and by the way, I agree with this, that master leases are an economic weapon of mass destruction. Nothing like having fixed liability and variable income to destroy a business. But Sonder, Selena, Lux, Urban, and probably a few others that I'm forgetting, managed to raise hundreds of millions of dollars from VCs. So why the hell are VCs giving them money?
Yeah, look, those are some vivid words when hearing them back that I used.
Hey, I quoted you, man, so I like it.
I think I said this preview in another context, but I really love the quote by Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena. It gives me goosebumps still that it's not the critic that counts, but the credit belongs to the person who strives valiantly, who, when they fail, at least they fail daring greatly. So it's just that the language is so vivid and strong, right? Their place will never be with the cold and timid souls that neither know victory nor defeat. And the reason I quote that is I saw the Sonder story as it was developing. We were building in the same time period. It's easy now to be the critic. But frankly, I was skeptical about some of the decisions they were making as they were making them. And yet there was a nagging paranoia of what if we have it wrong? Because they had a really passionate team. They had a really big vision. I think they had strong backing, really smart investors, and yet they still, in the end, collapsed. But I think they got some, from the sidelines, I think they got some core ideas right and some major things wrong. But in the end, they got one or two big things wrong. And those two big things were the master lease model, especially in the context of the United States, and then their G&A load. They had something like $237 million of G&A in 2022 when Hilton, a company that was more than 100 times larger than they were, had 382 million of G&A. Those two things just can't coexist together. They were overspending. They were spending as if they were a tech company, not an operating business.
Yep.
They were then levering the business up.
That's probably because of some of their investor base, because a lot of their investor base is used to a SaaS model with high incremental margin. So you burn cash, raise cash, burn cash, raise cash until eventually you have a high profit margin. And, that's not this business.
I think that that actually is maybe that's the point not said that was not in what I wrote.
Don't walk it back now. Come on.
I'm not walking back. I'm adding to it. Like, why did this happen, right? And I think it's downstream of the capital markets, right? Interest rates, this was a zero interest rate period. Zero interest rate allow you to spend well ahead of cash flow. There was a lot of capital that was looking to invest in businesses that had binary and outsized outcomes, which is the venture model. The venture model works on pattern recognition, and often pattern recognition can be a very potent approach to investing, but it can also lead to some false positives. The pattern recognition for Sonder was probably borrowed from what led Airbnb to be really successful, but Airbnb is an asset-light marketplace. Airbnb was able to grow G&A really quickly, and they were able to grow units and GMV very quickly, but they didn't have any fixed liabilities that they were adding as they were growing those. And so the venture world sort of took patterns from one area, applied them to the Sonder model, and they encouraged. So in my view, if Sonder didn't exist, someone else would have done it in exactly the same way, because upstream of Sonder, the incentives from capital were really pushing for that kind of behavior. And the kind of behavior that I'm talking about is any mechanism to grow revenue very rapidly was thought of at the time as destined to work, or at least have high enough probability of working. And so when you're master leasing, that actually creates a vicious cycle, right? The best way to grow revenue if you're leasing properties is add more properties. The best way to add more properties is to lease at a higher rent. And if you're leasing at a higher rent, that means your unit economics and your ultimate company profitability is degraded. And then as you grow more quickly, number of units under lease, your revenue grows, which gives you more capital, which raises expectations for growing even faster, which causes you to raise your rents, by the way, on long-term agreements. And then one day you wake up, interest rates change, the capital markets abruptly decide that what you were doing previously and they kind of signaled was the right thing to do is the complete wrong thing to do. And then the management team, who are well-meaning, who are encouraged by their investors, all of a sudden is told you have to do the exact opposite, but they're saddled with 10-year long high rent agreements. And so that's, in my view, the autopsy.
I have a little bit of a different take. My experience with Sonder was, one, when my wife and I were dating, she lived in a Sonder for a while. So I got to live that through her. And then I actually intentionally went and stayed at the one in Barcelona. And it was interesting seeing from a consumer perspective, there wasn't a lot of unique things to it. So I always was really skeptical just from a consumer perspective. I then was actually, like a year ago, when Francis was being pushed out, actually recruited to replace, and had a very brief conversation with some of the board members. And it was very clear to me, I actually withdrew almost immediately. There was some serious problems. And I think, and this is me observing from my own objective opinion, there was some serious execution problems. They had some good concepts, but I think any model where you have fixed liability and variable income, it's just so you're one recession away, you're one event away from being out of business. At least in the hotel business, we have variable income and variable expenses, absent your mortgage, absent like property taxes. But if you're not a leasehold hotel, that's why a lot of people hate leasehold, because you got a fixed lease payment, right?
And look, it's also but not great for the owners. It's sort of an illusion of safety for
That's
owners. They
right.
believe they have this guaranteed fixed payment, but they get the worst of both worlds in a situation where the hotel market deteriorates. At the end of the day, if they sign with someone who has many leases across their portfolio, they should know there's systemic risk there. And all leases simultaneously will go bad, and those operators will either go bankrupt or find a way to stop making payments. And in a world where the hospitality market dramatically grows, they're stuck with just the fixed rent component, and the operator collects all the excess profits. So if you sort of work out kind of several steps into the future as the owner of the property, you end up getting stuck. You don't get the guaranteed payment in the downside case, and you don't get the excess profits in the upside case. You might as well be in the hotel industry and focus on making the best product possible. The thing that maybe isn't visible in what I just said is the other issue for owners of the master lease is that it misaligns incentives, and the properties typically become capital starved. The owner has no incentive to invest in the property because they don't make any extra money if they invest in the property. And the operator on a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease doesn't usually have enough of a payback period in order to put meaningful dollars into the property. So what actually ends up happening is not only is it structurally set up not to be a high quality relationship, but it delivers a worse product to the consumer.
That's right. That's what I experienced in Barcelona. The common areas were not well maintained. Like you said, like I remember the corridor carpet was atrocious, and I'm thinking to myself, well, there's no incentive for the building owner to invest in this, because they're not going to get more of a lease payment from Sonder. So unless Sonder wants to use its own operating cash to do that, which arguably they had a cash problem already. So
Well, you
you're
need the
right.
payback to be on that spend. Their weighted average lease term was 7 years. So you would need the payback to happen on that. The carpet improvement stays with the property forever.
Right.
But
You got to
or
get
they,
your return back out in 6 or 7 years with higher ADR, higher occupancy, and that's probably hard to prove out, or something you're not even focused on when you're just burning cash.
yeah. And look, ground leases are similar, but some of them are in 99 years. It's a different form of financing in that case, and so depending on the setup, can make sense.
Yeah, there's some iconic, just about every iconic hotel in the U.S. is a leasehold. It's going to outlive us. Is a little different than a 7-year relationship. Now that you've taken some of them over, what have you seen?
Yeah, so we've become in many ways the proven and go-to partner to a lot of hotel owners who, whether they're formerly leased their property to Sonder, or boutique hotel owners in markets where they've really struggled because the cost structure of traditionally, the way they operate hospitality hasn't worked in markets that haven't seen enough RevPAR growth to support expense growth. Broadly across the US, expenses have grown at a faster rate for hotel owners than RevPAR has. And so many hotel owners are seeking alternative ways to drive bottom line. And because we've built our own infrastructure, we're not mired by the constraints of existing systems that sort of put you as a hotel owner and operator in a straitjacket and don't allow you the maneuverability of automating things and delivering a better and more compelling guest experience. What we found in taking over Saunders, and look, the playbook is first, transition as seamlessly as possible so that there's continuity of operations and cash flow to owners. We support all the same technology systems that Sonder had in their properties, whether it's the locks or the internet or otherwise. Activate distribution effectively, retake lifestyle photography where necessary, and then implement our operating system to drive down costs. That restarts cash flow for the owner. And then step 2 or 3 is to then work with the owner to actually ensure that the property is positioned in a way that will deliver to guests high quality experience. Some properties that Sonder had were already, your experience in Barcelona, they had a very mixed portfolio. Some of their properties were like what you experienced. Some were quite strong.
The location was phenomenal. And the
Yep.
room product was phenomenal. The public space and some of the cleanliness was troublesome. I guess I should have qualified all that.
And so we would go through all of their review scores. We'd look at keywords that have, not even just keywords, it's, semantic processing of the actual full reviews. We put categories of issues together that are the highest incident rate, root cause incident rates. And then we'd immediately fix those that are in our control. So if it's housekeeping, that's operational. We can fix that. If it's something around the hospitality standards, we can fix that quickly. But then there's a broader, hey, here's some things that'll take a little bit more time if it's more building systems or design oriented issues.
Did they have a bridge period? Because Marriott pulled out immediately, right? They terminated the 20-year licensing deal, I think, like over a weekend.
I was at a property that we had taken over from Sonder. I was talking to our front desk person. It was on a Sunday. We were going through who was in house. So I was talking to her. And right around when I was talking to her, she got a message from one of her former colleagues at Sonder. She shared, hey, every single person at Sonder just got let go.
I think they even sent a message like the guests had to get out of the hotel.
Yeah, it was a very abrupt closure, which left a lot of folks stranded. And obviously, Marriott pulled the plug on them after they learned that the company wasn't going to be able to support operations. It was as dramatic as it probably can get.
I mean, my perspective is rightly so. Marriott had an agreement. And my take was they weren't fulfilling that. From the court filings that I read, Sonder basically tried to ransom them. If you go read the court filings, basically said they threatened them if they didn't give them funding. And, I put that on like who was left. I think it was the Sonder board at that point was running. Every officer left effectively. My take is that like I don't blame Marriott at all.
Yeah, they were they had to move very quickly. And that's my sense as well. I certainly think, and by the way, generally speaking, in this deal, I think Marriott had the right vision in
I think they went into this, they gave them a ton of funding, tremendous funding when they signed the deal. I mean, Marriott did, that is. I agree with you. I think there was good intent there, and it may, maybe with the right partnership, it could have worked.
My view is right vision, wrong horse in the end of the day. And they were investing in the fastest growing segment in hospitality. Clearly, hospitality will have an apartment style offering. And you look at the brand bar for the big hotel brands, and you realize there's every iteration of brand. And there's not much when it comes to apartment style inventory. And that to me is when people say lifestyle, I think it often doesn't mean much.
You saw Hilton just announce Apartments by Hilton.
Yeah. And I think that honestly puts into focus. To me, this is going to be the fastest growing segment of hospitality. I mean, you look at the CAGRs of short-term rentals, vacation rentals, they're all growing much faster in, total revenue and units than traditional hospitality. And then you look at how people travel and they live. True lifestyle is living on the road like you live at home. That is someone's lifestyle. And there's not actually an offering that matches that. I think what's interesting about the Hilton announcement is they chose to partner versus build. And Chris and KJ have historically, been among the best in the world at building new. They've been very shy to partner. They've been more focused on building organically. It just shows this is a fairly different segment. And so it took us a long time as Kasa to really hone the nuances to operate in apartment buildings, both as partial building and full building. And so I think that's the sign of the segment growing.
I agree with you. And brand new residences have really taken off too. You just bought Mint House. Help us understand, how did the deal come together? What's the driver of this acquisition? And for those of you who don't know, Mint House, they had acquired a locale last year, right? Or early last year, I think.
Yep.
So they had also done some M&A as well. Help us understand the deal from your perspective.
Yeah. Look, we have gotten to know the Mint House team over a long time. The portfolio that they operated really fit like a glove to Kasa's portfolio. And frankly, the deal we're excited to kind of further establishes us as the consolidator and industry standard. They ran a process for strategic alternatives at the end of last year.
Okay.
They selected Kasa, for a number of reasons. There's alignment in our culture, an overlapping portfolio of properties, our financial strength. And so we had very strong backing, our technology stack. And so the thesis behind the deal is 1 + 1 should equal 3 or 4, where the scale plus the combined capability and the strength of the portfolio that they brought aboard not only drives to a better result for our collective investors, but delivers stronger P&Ls to owners, where they benefit from an improved commercial engine that we now have. We were really fired up about the quality of the product that they had. They had this beautiful property called 70 Pine in the financial district of Manhattan that we now operate, a property right next to the White House in DC.
There's a Met House here in Dallas that I've never been to it, but I want to check it out.
Yeah, please do.
Now, you've also taken over some distressed assets and played in that space. The former Ace Hotel in Pittsburgh, for example, I think it's now the Maverick by Casa, some properties in Detroit, Long Beach as well. How are you taking hotels that didn't work and you're making them work?
Danny Meyer came to one of our all hands, and he said,
I love some Danny Meyer. How'd you get him?
Every single person who starts at Casa gets the book Setting the Table. We're a hospitality business. So,
Okay.
I was introduced to him by one of our investors. He's an LP.
Wow.
Their fund.
He's one of my, up there. I've never met him. I've always wanted
I think he's exceptional. And he was gracious enough to speak and Chip as well. Chip Conley, great visionaries, folks who are amazing at execution. When Chip came to our all hands, imparted in us one of our 4 core values that we are Hall of Fame hosts. He said, "You're not just delivering hospitality; you are in the Hall of Fame. You want your jersey retired," and that is literally one of our 4 values. And when Danny Meyer came, he said, "High tech doesn't mean low service. In fact, what I see is high tech, high service, high margin hospitality," and that's sort of the through line of what we do when we take over these properties.
I like that. How much can you actually, let's say you take over a hotel that is in receivership, like how many points are we talking here of margin improvement?
It's very meaningful. It obviously depends on the market and the property specifically, but the general rule is it's not hundreds of basis points. It's in the 1,000 plus basis point.
So you're moving actual cash flow profit margin by at least 10%. So
yeah. I mean, look, it's different depending on the asset. If its starting line is very high margin, there's less opportunity.
Right.
One of the things that is very helpful in how we operate is that the cost structure is fairly predictable. And because we built some of our own systems, we are not constrained in the same way by what is existing systems or brand standards kind of require. And so we have a lot more ability to be creative. The other things that we do is that root cause analysis that I mentioned, we do that on every property. We consistently improve review scores before and after by a standard deviation or 2 across reputation channels. So Google, TripAdvisor, Booking.com. I mean, our properties across multiple cities are in the top, 1, 2, or 3 slot in terms of ranking on TripAdvisor in Chicago, Austin, San Francisco, LA, et cetera.
I know we've been chatting for a while now. Maybe to pivot, AI. How are you thinking about AI and bringing that into the Casa operating system today?
I think that one of the scariest things about AI is a potential future void of purpose for people, because you think the Garden of Eden is heaven, but actually a problemless world leaves us very little to do. But hopefully there will be a Cambrian explosion of creativity and expression. That would be the bull case. But that's far away. I will say I teach a class at Columbia University in data and AI and real estate. And the master students I expect to learn more from them than I can impart, because just like when, technology changes, those in the generation before, they don't know how to type as effectively or use computers as effectively. You have to really be in the playground and utilizing these systems day in, day out, be willing to waste time learning. And we have the curse of actually knowing how to do many things in a way that works well enough. And so we're not going to be as interested in exploring AI. I try to fight against that. The way that we're utilizing it in Casa, I mean, the first thing that we did is we went GL by GL item in our P&Ls, similar to what we did to start the business, frankly, to figure out where are there opportunities to do things differently and better than the existing approach. And we identified opportunities, GL by GL. So we said, can this get automated? Can this just fundamentally be improved?
Like, can the workflow be automated?
Yes. Can the work that was previously done manually be done in a more automated fashion? Yeah. So that's it. But that's, I think, scratching the surface. We worked with our engineering team and we worked side by side with our operating team. And we went line by line, and we sort of debated certain things. Some things we thought was a 2-year period to automate. Some was a 5-year period. And so that's sort of the starting line of how we.
How many software engineers do you have?
We have a product design and development team of 25 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're almost like a software company embedded within an operating company.
Yeah, there's a power to the fact that we're singular in the market. in having this capability to develop our own systems. But ultimately, the technology is a means to an end, not an end in itself. It needs to deliver better margin and better hospitality.
What's one that you could share that you were able to automate or at least partially automate and there's a big return that maybe is not top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe just to like frame it up, the biggest opportunity is drive more revenue, right? You can only so much. Great businesses are not
Yeah, that's
built on
fair.
lowering costs. So the commercial org, if folks have used Nano Banana and Gemini, kind of the consumer side, they'll see how
Uh-huh.
go on Gemini.google.com and create an image using it, and it's remarkable. It's probably the best on the market right now. All of these will be transformed and more personalized marketing and more marketing that really fits the user research that's done in a more programmatic way, and then just meta opportunities. All of our team, our engineers, are using Claude Code and Cursor to increase the speed of which they're building. Customer service is 10% of our cost structure, and at the moment, a third of messages to guests are driven by automation. I think the thing that maybe is less obvious is before we started, we first implemented an urgency score. So when you call or text us, we very quickly understand whether it's an urgent message or not, and we change the order of the queue. And that's a very high leverage change. So if you're having trouble getting into your room, we will prioritize that question over if you need a recommendation for a restaurant nearby. Clearly, every second in a lockout feels like 30 minutes, and you're maybe a little bit more understanding of a minute or two response time when you're looking for recommendations. So the first thing we did is implement an urgency score. The next thing we did is actually work on categorizing the messages effectively using AI. So anytime you text us, if it's about luggage storage, the AI will say this is a luggage storage question. And then, we connected the agent to our data. We were able to feed information about the calendar availability, rates, inventory, about the, what's in the actual unit that you're staying in. And we started creating recommended responses to our customer service team that they would either accept, reject, or modify. And we started seeing and tweaking these by categories. So we started really seeing that, hey, luggage storage, because we have very clear instructions in our back end on how luggage storage works, the recommended response by AI was already 95% correct. We tweaked how it worked to get it to 99+% correct. And then we said, anytime a luggage storage question comes in, we will automate the response to the guest because we have very high confidence over a very large number of inquiries that our response driven by AI is going to be accurate, versus when we categorize your question as a different question that we know it's less certain in its ability to answer, we'll handle it by hand. And that has gotten us today to 35% or so of questions answered directly. That's a big cost savings and allows our team to focus on the higher acuity messages. By the way, last year it was at 25%. The year before it was at 5%. What's been interesting is how iterative it is, but how progressively and predictably better we are getting over time.
At what point does it save whole bodies? You're driving productivity. I think you talk about it rather than reactive AI, actually anticipating needs of customers. So there's that component. But at some point, if you're driving productivity high enough, you need less people, right? How does that happen? I mean, are you able to operate hotels with less people today?
One of the reasons we're able to drive higher margins is we're much more efficient with our labor, right? We have over 3,000 rooms, but we have something like 200 team members in operating roles. And I would guess the average hotel operator, if you do a ratio of people to rooms, that's pretty outsized.
How do you do things though, like housekeeping is still pretty personnel intensive?
We're much more focused on quality there, better feedback loop, better scheduling, and better QA for housekeeping. Every housekeeper has a checklist that they go through on their phone. They take a photo before and after of the clean. We're able to look at those images both by hand and, frankly, using AI-assisted image recognition to analyze if it fit brand standard. When a guest checks in and leaves a review that is around cleaning, we ask for a cleaning rating. We tie that to the housekeeper who actually cleaned the room, and so we can incentivize, housekeepers that are going above and beyond consistently, and those who are not delivering to the standard, we can ensure there's training opportunities.
When do you think robotics comes into play in a meaningful way? AI is at a current stance where you can automate a lot of back office work, but physical jobs, you can make physical people more efficient, but you still have housekeepers. At what point do you think like robots may be cleaning rooms?
Yeah, I mean, This is an area where I'm purely a pundit, not an expert. My brother is an expert. He builds robots for Amazon warehouses.
I was reading an article that over half of the robots in the United States are owned or developed by Amazon. I think there's like over 1,000% more robots in China, whereas the US is leading on agentic AI. They've really leaned into open source AI and then robotics. Like they are kicking our ass when it comes to robotics.
Yeah, it's seeing videos of the demos that are out there is inspiring. My brother's robots, I think, have delivered several billion packages. My sense is this is purely speculation, but my belief and sense is there's a lot of hype about robotics right now, and the technology is progressing, but it's where self-driving was in 2015, 2016, where it's still actually fairly far away. But the hype made one think maybe it was closer than it appeared. Whereas today, self-driving has really creeped up on us. For whatever reason, I don't hear about it very frequently, but those who have a Tesla and have the latest hardware for version 14, their car is basically autonomous with very few interventions. And Waymo and Zoox are actively deploying across multiple cities. And when you sit in a Waymo for the first time, you're like, oh, this is actually solved as a problem. There are a lot of cool demos and a lot of hype in robotics, but we're actually still quite a bit away. It will take longer than we expect, but it'll happen faster than we think.
I think there's going to be a middle step that in the 3 to 5 year window, we'll have workforce augmentation, meaning that you'll have a robot paired up with a housekeeper. And so the robot cleans the toilet, strips the bed, but all the more fine motor skill things like moving furniture, remaking the bed, the person still does. And so instead of having a housekeeping team of 10, you have like 7. And then 10, 15 years away, then you have like, okay, you got Optimus cleaning your room. It's almost like the auto manufacturing work. It really took like 20 years for these Ford plants and all that to be fully automated. And so that's my theory, almost. I mean, it's kind of like driving today, right? Like if you go to California, 5 to 10% of the cars on the road are driverless now.
We're living in one of the craziest. I think the AI agents will automate my job before housekeeping. And so I'll be out helping our housekeeping team clean rooms to make myself useful before the robots.
I just thought of this. Now, this is kind of out in left field, but I didn't have this in the prep notes I had worked on. What do you think about, like Cloudbeds and Muse have raised a war chest. Then Cloudbeds just announced this Cloudbeds collection. Do you see them as so you've kind of taken this vertically integrated opco, which you're really the only game in town, and they're obviously competing with Oracle and some of the legacy, and they also compete with the brands who have fully depreciated tech stacks. Do you think they move into like the operating space and become like a competitor against you?
We're seeing a lot of things change in hospitality and beyond. This is one of the parts of the movie that will be interesting to watch. If I were looking at them dispassionately, not just trying to call balls and strikes, and this week is an easy week to say this on because software stocks really sold off. But I also was at your dinner at Alice before software stocks sold off and said something very similar, which is if you look at what it takes to build a software business, one of the best economic models and that business world has seen because of how recurring the cash flow is, how the marginal cost of providing software to an initial user is very low, so it leads to high margins, how sticky the revenue and thus recurring it is, and how large the markets that it's tapping. I think that a lot of those are in threat. And the reason is the cost of creating software is plummeting at a very rapid pace. So if it took $100 million to build a software business over the last decade, it's going to take a fraction of that today, right, and maybe even more of a fraction of that in the future. And what happens when if you have a piece of real estate and it costs you $100 million to build, but the person next door built their building for $1 million and it's just as good as yours and maybe even better, well, they're going to charge lower rents. So that's right. What will happen is the new entrants will charge lower prices, which will pressure the margins of the existing incumbents. And look, there's some stickiness to all this. A PMS is deeply rooted inside of your operation. It takes time and effort to retrain people. It takes time and effort to switch systems. So they have some defense, some time to adapt, but they're going to need to go into areas that are more defensible over time. Time will tell, what will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Eric Schmidt that I heard speak that said, in 10 years, if your selling point is your UI, you may be out of business, right? Because user interfaces may even be gone. I appreciate all the discussion. So I like to end with a fun rapid fire round. There's
Sure.
no real right or wrong answer. So first one, company that you look at for inspiration.
I think leaders, Reed Hastings and Netflix, have been.
That's a good one.
It's really, first off, he came to one of my classes and spoke. He was very humble. He's very thoughtful. I thought he was one of the strongest. He set a standard for what a CEO should be like. Their culture manifesto, I think, is very inspiring.
Best hotel you've stayed at that's not a Casa property.
Yeah. All right. I was going to say a Casa property, but the Fasano in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and also the Emiliano in Sao Paulo. But the Fasano is right on the water. It's got an amazing rooftop. It's amazing, and I also went there for the start of my.
You were going to take what's the Casa property you wanted to call out?
We opened a property with Toll Brothers and Prudential in San Diego about a year ago.
Cool.
A portion of it is Casa, multifamily,
Okay.
furnished apartments, and a portion of it is unfurnished apartments. And I think it's outperforming the branded luxury hotel set by a decent margin on RevPAR. And it's just a really, really high quality.
Where is it? Where in San Diego is it?
It's in Little Italy.
Little Italy. Okay, cool. I'm going to have to hit you up for a room next time I'm in San Diego.
Come visit. 70 Pine in New York as well, in Financial District. Welcome when you're visiting New York also.
Okay. Be careful what you wish for. Do you think there'll be another Sonder style bankruptcy in the next year?
I think there will continue to be folks who sign leases, and there'll continue to be owners who are enticed by them. And while there won't be, a company that grows in the same way as Sonder to the same size, there will be other smaller versions of it, no doubt.
Airbnb, partner, competitor, or something else?
Partner.
And what would you do different if you started Casa today, knowing what you know now?
That's a good question. First off, there were a lot of mistakes that we made along the way. I would have considered raising real estate capital earlier in order to vertically integrate and control the experience completely. I think because we didn't, we had to fight really hard to earn trust from owners. And so that became a source of strength. We built out a management business without any captive real estate arm, which is, I think, relatively difficult and rare. But it would have been helpful to defining the brand more effectively, to have a couple of properties that we fully controlled the design and real estate.
Makes sense. Well, Roman Pedan, I appreciate you being on today, my friend. What are you not done with?
We are not done with building Casa. I always say we're at day zero. And within that, we're not done with helping owners make the most of their properties. I want to unlock creativity in the hotel world and give creatives who are building new brands the underlying infrastructure to power their brands that allows them to focus on what they do best, the placemaking, the real estate that they're selecting, the experience, curation, and allow us to take care of the underlying systems and processes around finance, accounting, PMS, technology, distributions, corporate sales. And so I'm excited to help hopefully many creatives deliver on that.
Well, thanks for being on. Check them out. Roman's on LinkedIn as well. And thanks for being on. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.